Talking about here that you've got a koira, we know has to be a tefach wide, right? Over here you don't have a koira which is a tefach wide, so what you've done and gone is you've taken two koiras each which on is less than a tefach. So, first case that we spoke about is when they're both alongside each other. And now we're talking about a different case. They're not alongside each other, one's higher than the other. Rabbi Yossi says, you see the top one as if it's down below, alongside the bottom one, and the bottom one, or the bottom one as if it's within line of the top one. Basically, you push either the top one up, the top one down. You don't actually. You make as if the top one's up, or the top one's down, or the bottom one's up, to make them alongside each other, which is the halacha of chavoi rami, right? Oval vad, and on condition, as long as the higher one is not allowed to be the highest one's allowed to be is 20 amas high, because that's the halach of every klira. It's now allowed to be higher than 20 amas high, and the bottom one is not allowed to be lower than 10 tefachim high. Says the Gemara. If they're both within 20 amas high, which means that the top one is about 20 amas high and the bottom one's a bit higher than 10 tefachim, Amrinan chavot rami, we say chavot rami. Says the Gemara, we're talking about over here, these koiras are each less than a tefach. And still, we're happy to say chavot rami on a koira which is less than a tefach. We just said that you're not allowed to say chavot rami on less than a tefach. It doesn't work to say chavot rami on less than a tefach. Amalei, yes, a question mark. The less tefach question mark. Amalei, he said to him, Toritz ve'emahachi comma. This is how you should explain the brayso. When it says the higher one is allowed to be 20 amas high and the bottom one is allowed to be 10 tefachim, it doesn't mean in the same case. It's two separate cases. Case number one is, the top one shouldn't be more than 20 amas high. It shouldn't be more than 20 amas high. It should be within 20 amas high, and the bottom one, within 3 tefachim from the top one. Case number one. Case number two, inami, the bottom one shouldn't be lower than 10 tefachim, only higher than 10 tefachim, and the higher one should be close to it, less than 3 tefachim away, because then we will say when it's less than 3 tefachim, we can say the halacha of lavud, and lavud, there's no halachas of how wide it has to be. So for chavot rami, we said to be able to push the koira down and make as if it's on level with the other koira, or to push anything down, that you need a tefach width, like Rava told us. The Gemara, we're not doing chavot rami over here, we're doing lavud. It's within 3 tefachim when you're saying lavud. However, if there's a gap of more than 3 tefachim between the two koiras, given the less tefach, because there's no tefach in the actual width of the koira, we cannot say chavot rami, and then you're going to be stuck that you don't have a good koira. Full stop. Okay, now we're going back to the Mishnah. We've got a new Gemara now till the Mishnah. Let's see if we can get all the way to the Mishnah. So the Mishnah said, right at the beginning of the Perek, sorry, it wasn't at the beginning of the Perek, the beginning of Amud Aleph, Chav Beis Amud Aleph, V'shetilasa meruba mechamasa. Tilasa meruba mechamasa means that there's more shade than sun. That's one Mishnah. Now if you look quickly in another Mishnah, on Daf Beis Amud Aleph, the first Mishnah on the Perek, it says the same halacha, but in a different way. Here it says that if it's more shade than sun, then it's kosher. On the first Mishnah, it says when it's chamasa, meruba mitzvasa, when there's more sun than shade, psula, it's possible, right? So we've got two extremes. We've said more shade than sun is kosher, more sun than shade is possible.
Is it not the same thing?
Now we've got something in the middle now. What happens if they're exactly the same amount? 50-50. Well, one Mishnah would be mavur that to be possible it has to have more sun, but the same amount as kosher, and the other would be mavur that to be kosher has to have more shade, but if it's the same amount, it's possible.
It's very unpractical. How do you measure it? It's like where the sun is throughout the day. Is it
right. So at this point, we're going to discuss the actual schach before we get to the Gemara's Teret.
So without you look at the schach.
Look at the schach and imagine that. Say if you've got.
What I'm saying is in the 9 o'clock in the morning or 10.
Yeah, 100%. Depends. Yeah, exactly. Yes. At this point, the Gemara understands. Tilas Reb Chamos is toilet on how much schach you have. Do you have more spaces than schach, or do you have more schach than space? Okay, let's see the Gemara. Our Mishnah said if you've got more shade than sun, kashera, it's kosher. Says the Gemara, haki hadadi. If they're exactly the same amount of space and schach, comma, psula, it's going to be possible. That's what you would take out from our Mishnah. Full stop. Why? Just do it now and then you'll get over it. V'hatanan, be'edach perekin, comma. We learn in another Mishnah, in another Perek. Be'edach perekin means the first Perek of the Masechta. Be'edach perekin is the first Perek, comma. There it says, v'shechamasa meruba mitzilasa. If there's more sun than shade, comma, pesula, it's possible, full stop. Which you can understand from that, haki adadi, if they're exactly the same amount of schach and space, kashera, it's kasha. So it seems to be a stira. If you learn our Mishnah, it sounds like the only way for it to be kasha is more shade than sun, which means more schach than space. If you learn the Mishnah in the first Perek, it would sound like that it's ready kasha as long as it's the same amount and not more sun than shade. Yeah, all question mark. All clear? Good. Says the Gemara lo kasha. Answers the Gemara lo kasha, comma. There's nothing shver. Kan milamala, kan milamata. So let's just go with Rashi's pshat. Kan milamala. So you can write on the side a footnote. Kan milamala. When the schach itself has exactly the same amount of schach and space, you look up and you see schach tefach, space tefach, schach tefach, space tefach. The whole way along, that's where it says that it's kosher. Can milamata, but if down at the bottom, you measure it and you can see the same amount of shade and sun, says the Gemara, then it'll be possible. Why? Because if at the bottom it's the shade, the same amount as the sun, then it must be that in the schach, there's more space than sun, space than schach. So again, kan milamala. Kan milamala means when you check the schach up there, then it's going to be possible. Yeah, do you want to write this a footnote? That'll be the easiest. Kan milamala, comma. So as a footnote you can write, when lamala, the hainu, the actual schach, is the same amount as schach as space, then it's possible. No good. Kan milamata, however, if when you measure on the floor, you can see the same amount of shade as sun, then it's kosher. Why? Because if there's the same amount of sun and shade at the bottom on the floor, then it must be that up there there's more schach than space. Because the way it works is, when you've got a space, the sun, as it goes further and further away, it grows. So if you've got a lot of, according to how much sun you've got, you know that you've got much less space on top, because the sun, when it beams through, goes bigger. Anybody with me? Yep. Yeah? Okay.
1 minute. What are you saying? The sun grows bigger.
Yeah.
But then if you're...
The only thing that turns up for this purpose. You see here how as you go away.
No, we want more sun.
More sun. We get more sun.
As you go further, the sun means if you measure over there, then the sun, as it goes further away, gets bigger. Can you see on the lights going bigger and wider?
The radius spreads.
The light gets.
The light gets bigger.
Of light expands.
Exactly.
And it's not. It's the opposite. It's the opposite. It's when. Be careful. When this is closer, so the shade is bigger. The shade fills up more space. Can you see?
Yeah, that's also true. But the Gemara says that when according to Rashi, the sun gets bigger.
So then why is there an issue if it's both the same on the
So if it's on the floor the same, then it's not an issue, it's good. Because if it's the same on the floor, it must be that up there the avir is smaller. So if it's the same on the schach, that's possible, no good.
Why?
Because you need more schach than space. However, if on the ground you measure it and you can see the same amount of space, the same amount of sun or shade, it must be in the more schach up there because as the sun goes down, it makes bigger lines than the shade. And therefore, really, what you've got up there is more schach than space, and that's why it's kosher.
So really, it's not about shade or sunlight; it's about the schach.
Exactly.
So
100%.
If you
Have more schach than the fact that down.
Is it possible to have more schach, but down there to have more
Sun?
Sun?
Well, first of all, definitely when the sun's on the side,
Yeah.
you'll end up with a lot more sun than thing, but we don't care about that. We care about schach. Schach
That
means
makes
that...
sense, that, because, well, say before, throughout the day,
Oh,
it's all
exactly.
varied.
You can't
So as
start
long as
working
you've
out.
got more schach,
Yeah, then that's called
Then
you're
that'll
having
be-
more of a shade than sun.
right.
It happens to be the sun's
whether
managed to
there's
get
more
through.
sun or not, it doesn't
Exactly.
matter.
For example, if you make all your walls out of glass, let's say, your sukkah will be full of sunlight. But that's not the problem. The point is that the schach has to be sort of a stoppage of the sun. So if it's really a stoppage of the sun, the fact that it's, the sun has positioned itself in a way that's not being stopped, that's not a problem. Now let's just finish off the Gemara. Omer of Papa, Haynu da Omri Inshi. That's what people say, comma. Kuzuzah mila'el. When you've got a hole the size of a zuz, which is a small kohen. On top, mila'el means on top, comma. Ki'istara mila matachas, it's going to be like a big kohen on the floor. Sun always goes bigger. And therefore, whenever you're measuring on top, then it has to be, if it's exactly the same, it's possible. If you're measuring on the bottom and it's exactly the same, it's kosher. Why? Because if it's the same on the floor, then you know that up there's more schach than spaces.
What's the last thing?
Istarta, which is a bigger kohen, milatochas on the floor. When you've got a hole the size of a zuz, when you've got a space in the schach the size of a zuz, which is a small kohen, istara milatachas, on the floor you'll see the sun the size of a stara, which is a much bigger kohen, because the sun always goes bigger. So I think we'll stop here. Thank you very much, everybody.